So one of the things I discovered about being a PA is just how different the job can be depending on who you're working for. And really thinking about the person for whom we're working, the boss, the manager, and the kind of way in which we got on with each other would actually make a huge difference to how my job was. And that's one of the things that I'm going to sort of use as part of the theme that we're going to talk about today. So, just really to explain what the outcomes are going to be. So 3 outcomes. If you've been to any of our other sessions, you'll know we always have 3 outcomes. So the first one being just to define the role, to understand what it is that is expected of us and so on. The second being to look at the confidence and credibility and so on to help you in your own self-belief. And then finally looking at your career and advancing your career. So those are the 3 aspects that I'm going to be considering. I do deliver, as I say, the training around PA skills at Reed, so I will draw upon that as well, just to give you some examples when we get to them. So first off, the job itself and what it is that we're supposed to be doing. I think probably key is the fact that we are a partnership. We're a partnership with our manager, with our boss, and so we do need to understand each other and be very clear about what our expectations are. So, first question is, what does your boss expect from you? And to give you the answers to this, what I did is I've asked a lot of people with whom I've worked in various training programs what they expect from their PAs. You know, what do they expect them to be like? What do they expect them to do, to behave? And, you know, those sort of considerations. So these are some of the things that they told us. So clearly competence and being able to know the job, the skills associated with the job and so on. Trust, because working in confidence, depending on the nature of the job, then a lot to do with the confidentiality, the sensitivity of the work that the person needs to be aware of as well. So they want to trust their PA. They also need a relationship based on openness. So anything perhaps that they think of, their thoughts, the kinds of difficulties perhaps that the person might experience, and to be willing to share those with the boss, with the manager. Reliability, so being able to count upon that person to provide what they say they will provide, to do things in a timely fashion, to be always able, as it were, to respond to the needs that the manager or the boss may have. And then finally, to support them in their role, to offer support in their role. So just thinking about all of those sorts of things, really, that the managers actually expect. Now, you might say, pretty obvious, but do you really know that's what they want? Because that's the question, isn't it? You know, I'm saying that through my experience and through asking people, but of course, until we actually ask, we don't really know. And I'm not saying you're not doing a good job, because I'm sure you are, but what people often say to me is that I assume everything's okay because nobody's told me it isn't. So in other words, we seem to only take notice of feedback when it's negative. So how about going and asking, is what I'm doing what you want? You know, that's quite a useful thing just to think about. So if we turn it round then and think about ourselves, what do we expect from our boss, from our managers? And this is an exercise which we do at the beginning of the training courses with PAs, where we share what we think we want as well. You know, from our perspective, what do we expect from the boss? No surprises. All the same things. All the same things the other way around. And it's amazing, those 2 lists, how they coincide. We also look for communication from our manager or from our boss. We want them to tell us, we want to be informed, we want to know what's happening. We don't want to be told on a needs-to-know type of basis. So we need to be part of that as well. That's what we want. But again, we need to make sure that we're actually asking for it. So there's an expression that we use quite a lot, which is ask for what you need to do the job well. You know, if you're not getting it, they may not guess. So, you know, just be clear about getting the right things. Just very briefly what a manager does, and this is drawn from one of our management modules. So just very simply put, if you like, just to understand the cycle of activities that managers are involved in. As you probably know, I've no doubt you know, the manager has to have certain objectives, they have targets and so on to be fulfilled. So the first thing that they need to do is to plan how they're going to do that. And that involves identifying what resources they need, whether it's people resources, money, equipment, information, what do they actually need to be able to fulfill the objectives. They then need to coordinate that. So having identified it and planned it, they then need to be able to coordinate either the provision of those resources from wherever they happen to be, but they need to coordinate all of the different communications with all different kind of individuals within the same organisation and outside as well. In order to ensure that things are on target, the bottom loop there, the bottom part of the loop, is monitoring. So they need to know what's happening, so they need to receive information, they need to be kept up to date with what's going on, because if you don't know what's happening, you can't be sure that you're on track, of course. So part of that role is to monitor. And a very important part of any manager's role is to motivate people. You get the best out of people if they are motivated. So that's also part of their role. And the final step on my loop here on the cycle is that of evaluating. To ensure that what is going on worked well or didn't work well, or what we need to do differently, or what we could learn for next time. So you might be saying, so why are you telling me all that? So the reason that I am telling you all that is that you understand, I'm sure you do, but just sometimes it's nice to see these things in a diagram, that you understand what it is that your manager's role actually is, what's needed, if you like, within the role. So when we look back to the support that person is expecting from you, that you've got some idea about where they are perhaps at any particular time on that cycle, and understand what they might be doing, therefore what they might be needing, and how you could possibly help to achieve that. So if you've realised that perhaps there's an element of motivation that they're undertaking at the moment, there's a bit of a problem with somebody in the team, maybe there's something you can do to help. Maybe you know that person well, and you can perhaps give him or her some ideas about what that person may respond to, for instance, as an example. But again, it helps us to understand, again, more about the actual role. So as I say, we're there to provide support as well, but we need to know when and where. In the various guises, if you like, of the role both you play and your boss will play, we're all part of a team. And never forget you're part of a team. So a wider team, obviously there's that quality of relationship between yourself and your manager or your boss, but also between other people in the team as well. And as a member of the team, you don't have a unique and just a single task to do. You're also there for the team as part of it. So you have every right to express what you think needs to be done, or things that you feel perhaps could be improved, or just ideas. And one of the things that's really important is to be proactive here. Come up with ideas, be interested, take part. Just be aware of what's actually happening at any particular time. And the more you come up with thoughts and ideas, the more you will be included in different things. So it isn't only about doing the things that we are asked to do, it's also volunteering or identifying things which we think would be useful. So just sort of stepping into that role about, when you were talking about X, I noticed that, and it would be helpful if we did, what do you think? There's nothing wrong with saying that, nothing wrong at all, but it just shows an interest. So I'm very enthusiastic, if you like, about the idea about being proactive, and about also bearing in mind the relationship, the partnership that you have to establish between yourself and your boss, and being clear about what that partnership needs to be like, so that both parties are satisfied. Does that make sense? Okay. So moving to the second part of what I'm going to talk to you about, which is coming back to ourselves, really, and thinking about what success might look like. So for this, we have our 3 C's, or the 3 circles that interlock. So we have competence, which is, of course, the skills. So whatever skills you feel that you need, and I'm sure you have those skills, but we can always tweak them a little. So that's about being competent in the skills that any PA would need to have. There's credibility, and credibility which is about being believed, about being believable, and being taken seriously. And there's confidence. So that's about how we put ourselves over, how we come across and how we put ourselves over. And credibility and confidence are very closely linked. They work very much together, and so I'm going to work on those 2 particular aspects of what we're considering here. So if you think about the behaviours that go with being credible, you will find certain people perhaps more credible than others, and just think to yourself what it is that they actually do. What is it that makes them credible? Why do you think they are credible? What kind of behaviours do they exhibit? And I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about a study that was done, a group of people who were observed. This is a psychological behavioural study. A group of people observed. They were all wearing exactly the same clothes, so grey tracksuit type thing. So there was no distinction in terms of how they actually looked. So you couldn't make any judgment on dress. And it was done as well so that people couldn't be heard. So it was literally on what people were doing, how they were moving, and their gestures. And the idea was to work out what kind of behaviours people who were powerful tended to have. So that's what it was for. So here's some of the results here. So the idea about standing tall and keeping head up rather than sort of, tipping down a wee bit and going a little bit inwards. So standing tall and keeping head up. Open and friendly gestures. So people who are powerful tend to use their arms like this, look at politicians and so on, and using slightly more open gestures and being friendly. Friendly is important. Slowing down, if you think about people who rush about and sort of always seem to be, rushing through things and looking through papers, and it must be around here somewhere, and looking for things, that doesn't appear to be quite so credible as somebody who moves with slightly more distinction, who moves slightly more slowly and appears to be more in control. So it's about, that sense of looking in control, just sort of moving slowly. I'm not saying things are in slow motion, because, that can look too laid back. But to move around and to use gestures whereby it just shows an element of control rather than panic. So that's what I mean by slow down here. Keeping eye contact, important in our culture in the West. We like people to look at us. We like to be able to see the person, and we feel that if we can't see their eyes, that we aren't being totally open with each other, rightly or wrongly, but that's the way it works in this part of the whole world, so in the West. So keeping eye contact and looking at people when we speak to them. Smiling, and I'm saying but not too much, but smiling is important because what it does is it makes us look non-threatening. It also relaxes our face muscles, so that tends to help a little there. You clearly don't go in smiling and grinning if you're going to tell somebody some really bad news. But there is a way of looking relaxed, which comes from, a small amount of relaxation around the face that comes from smiling. So people who are terribly intense, you may be worried, you may be concerned, it'll show in your face. And when all of the muscles are really very tense, it makes you look rather as though you're concerned or doubting something. So that's how it can be. And then finally, looking the part. So this is actually how you behave. And the first thing here, the most important thing is to take yourself seriously. If you don't take yourself seriously, how do you expect somebody else to? So thinking about, how do I look, how do I behave, what am I actually, how do I come across to people? And if I want to come across as being competent, credible and confident, I have to act that way and show it. So really important to look the part. Just a little picture here of perception. So picture here of, if you can't see it fully, it's a little fluffy kitten looking into a mirror and seeing a lion back. So the important thing here is that perception, of course, as we all know, is something which is not real. It's an idea. It's not tangible. You can't touch it. You can't, pick it up. But what it is an idea based on information that we receive. So how do we want people to see us? What do we want them to see us as being like? How do we want them rather, to treat us? And whatever that is, then we have to make sure that we're actually showing that. You can't expect somebody to be respectful, to be courteous, to be thinking that you're really very valuable if you don't show that. If you yourself aren't courteous and respectful, you can't expect to get it back. So we have to give out the behaviours and the vibes that we want to receive back. So the important thing is however you appear is how you will be responded to. So just be conscious of that. So you may not wish to appear as a lion, but you may not want to be a little fluffy, cuddly kitten either. So, might want something in between. So. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to consider, there are 6 qualities here, 6 qualities. So we've got your ability to meet deadlines, your ability to be organised, to be assertive, to communicate and to listen, to solve problems, and to present. And whether that's presenting like this or whether that's just explaining to somebody, it's still presenting an idea, different circumstances. And I'd like you to just look at those 6 different qualities, and I would like you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 7, where 7 is excellent. All right? Absolutely tops. Brilliant. That is a real strength for me. So 7 is tops. And I'd like you to rate at least 2 of those as 7, please. At least 2. You may have all of them, and that's brilliant. But just at least 2 as 7. So that's your 2 or 3 minutes. So I didn't obviously get round to everybody, but it's quite interesting to hear. Just honestly, how long did you spend talking about how brilliant you were before telling each other how rubbish you were at something else on that list? Generally what I find, and of course, I say generally, it's not always the case, but generally what we tend to find is that when I invite people to rate themselves as being excellent, or brilliant if you prefer, on those kinds of qualities, we're a little reluctant to do so. We're reluctant to say, well, I'm really good at that. I'm really excellent at that. I am a fantastically assertive person. No flies on me. We're kind of a little unwilling to do that, but it's ever so easy to tell you how disorganised I can be. I couldn't find such and such, and this had gone missing, and I just totally lose it when the pressure's on, and that's much easier to talk about, isn't it? Well, I hope it's not always, but what it does is just to sort of illustrate the point about credibility. Yeah? If you don't believe it, it's going to be hard for somebody else to, if that's what you'd like them to believe about you. So behave as if. You don't have to go around telling people that you don't know, and I appreciate some of you sitting next to people you don't know, so it's difficult to turn to a complete stranger and tell them, I'd like to tell you just how fantastic a communicator I am. So I know that's not very comfortable, but it's just a thought about telling other people, or just thinking to yourself, supposing I did have to tell them, actually, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. So this is something which is very important about how our thoughts, if you like, will influence our behaviours and so on. And I know if you've been to other sessions, you hear this a lot. But I just want to go through a scenario which will sort of illustrate how this actually works. So imagine that you're going with your boss to a meeting to talk about a report or a piece of work that you've done, so you know it well, and you're going to talk to your colleagues in the meeting about that piece of work, all right? So you know the piece of work, it's yours. You know, you've done it, but you're going along with your boss to do that. We'll do two. We'll do the negative version and then the positive of the same scenario. So there's my scenario. So in the first scenario, we go to the meeting, and before getting there, we're thinking, oh, it's going to be really difficult. They're going to ask me some questions, and supposing I can't answer. And I've done as much as I thought I could do, and I do know the figures are okay, but they might ask me something that I haven't prepared, or they might ask me what we're going to do next quarter or something like that, and I'm not absolutely certain. So there's my thinking. So how does that make me feel? It starts to make me feel a little bit nervous, a bit uncomfortable, concerned, and I'm worried about me. And because I'm worried about me, the body language behaviour goes all inwards, because I'm thinking, oh no, this is just going to be so difficult. And so all of my thoughts and feelings are focused on me. So, you know, inwards. So my behaviour, that's what other people see, my behaviour looks like somebody who is uncertain of themselves, going to not really know what they're talking about, and I'm giving out messages of being somebody who is just not at all certain about what they're doing. That's what's happening. So the performance, which is how other people will react to me, will be, I probably won't be heard. They probably won't take a lot of notice because I'm giving out the vibe of not being sure about what I'm doing. And if I give out that vibe, then it's an invitation to stop listening, isn't it? Sort of, oh, well, I'm not too sure about this. I did do some work on it, but, you know, I'm not sure it's worked as well as it could have, and so I'm exaggerating. But nonetheless, the impression that the other person gets is that of somebody who is uncertain of themselves, so therefore not to be really taken too much notice of. So if we rerun the whole thing, so starting off, same scenario, going with our boss to present or to talk about some work that we've done. So we start off at the beginning with the thoughts, and this time in a slightly different frame of mind, which says, this is going to be okay, I know what I'm talking about, I've done some work on this, the outcomes weren't quite complete, but that's okay, because I know where I can get any information they ask me about. So I know how to find the information, even if I don't have it here. So that influences how I'm feeling. So I'm feeling okay. I think I've got something useful. I'm feeling quite positive about meeting other people and telling them about what I've done. So the feelings, if you like, that are starting to rise are that of, I'm interested in you. I'm interested in how you're going to take this work. So my behaviour then starts to be with open body language. I'm starting to focus on outside of me rather than inside of me. And so therefore, in terms of performance, then it all turns out to be a lot more positive, because there's a person who looks interested in the colleagues and so on, has something useful to say, and is prepared to say it. So that I'm going to therefore be taken more seriously. So if we look then at confidence, because this leads into confidence, and think about where confidence comes from. Confidence comes from within. I think we would all agree with that. It comes from inside. And I think it's hugely influenced by attitude. And that, you know, big word that encompasses so many things. And attitude, which is deep inside us all, and beliefs. And our attitude is our own, literally. It's my attitude, you know. And if you tell me I've got the wrong attitude or a bad attitude, that's tough, really. It's just the way I am, and it's the way I think. And you telling me that I've got the wrong attitude will not make me change it. So let me just give you an example about attitude influencing confidence, that attitude is how we feel about things, how we feel or how we think about things. So how we feel about the organisation that we work for, how we feel about its products, how we feel about its services, if it's a service organisation, what it stands for, how we feel about the person that we work for, so our boss, our manager, our colleagues, so the people we're with, how we feel about the job that we actually do. Do we feel that it's actually worthwhile? Do we think it's worth doing? how we feel about ourselves in that role, and all of those different things that we might perhaps associate with that. And if you think about those things, you may not go around saying to people, well, do you know, I work for the most extraordinary, brilliant organisation, you know. I work for Read Learning and it's fantastic. And I tell you what, there's no better place to work. Fantastic set of people to work with, etc. Now, that might be true and I might think that. I'm unlikely to go around saying to my colleagues from Read Learning, what a brilliant place this is. But I would say it to you or to somebody outside of the organisation. If I had a different attitude, which was, you know, the organisation I work for, well, you know, it's a job, you know, who cares, it doesn't matter that much, and the people I work with, take it or leave it, really, you know, they're all right, they're a bit weird, not really my sort, but, you know, it's a job, pays the mortgage. That, the difference in attitude is hugely influential then on our confidence and how we feel about things. And as I say, I can't tell you to change it, nobody can, but you can examine your own attitude and think, well, if that's how I feel about it, how must that come across to other people? So, my little thoughts on confidence and where it comes from. So, if we consider confidence, and again, having identified where it comes from, here are some behaviours of confident people. And they assume then that their ideas are valid, so they don't worry about whether they should or shouldn't say things. An interesting thing about confident people, when we think about confident people, because as I go through the list, this might be something you think about, you might think in your mind's eye of somebody who you believe to be confident, or somebody you know, and you think, yeah, they're really confident. That same person, seen by somebody else, might come across as being very arrogant. Same person, same qualities, but it's more complex than this. But, you know, it depends what we think about that person anyway. But this is positive. So they assume their ideas are valid. They know they deserve to be heard. They take responsibility for what they do and what they say. They don't take things personally, which is very important, not to take things, you know, personally. It's about a situation or about an organisation and so on. And they have realistic expectations, so they're not expecting anything too high or too low, so something that's realistic. And each of those comes from within. So you would say, well, how would you describe that? How would you describe that? It's quite difficult to actually describe, but those are the characteristics of somebody who's confident. That's how they might behave or how they might come across. What do you think? Yes? Yes? So, in order to understand whether or not we come across as being confident, we need to think about how it's fed back to us. You know, how is feedback given and how does it come back to us? And it's actually noticing people's responses to us. You know, if they listen to us, if they don't listen to us, if they ask us questions, if they don't ask us questions, and all of those sorts of interactions which are very important to just be aware of how people interact. I just want to talk about two sorts of feedback. So first of all, where you're given praise, and how we react to it, how we accept praise. There's a few phrases here about how we respond to it. So things like, it's good to hear that, I worked hard on that, I was pleased myself. That was something I tried hard to focus on. Yes, I thought that worked well too. I picked up on that from my last review and tried to improve on it. And just straightforward, thank you. The reason that I put this out is because if we don't respond to positive praise in the way, if you like, which sort of recognises and is graceful, what happens is that sometimes somebody will say, well, that was really good, you know, you did a really good job there. And the response is, it was nothing really, it's what I do all the time, you know, just very simple. Just don't mention it, it just wasn't, just not important, doesn't matter. Or if somebody were to say, make a comment, let's say, about, I don't know, something you're wearing, your new coat or something, you know, it's a lovely coat, or I don't know, something like that. If you return to that person and say, oh, it's just some old thing, it was really cheap, or it's an old thing, it was at the back of, you know, that kind of thing that we do, it was at the back of the wardrobe. First of all, you won't get a compliment from that person again, because why would they? Because you've dismissed it. You've dismissed the compliment that they just made you. And not only have you dismissed it, you've also undermined their judgment. Because if they think you've done a good job and you said, nah, don't mention it, it's nothing, then they're going to say, oh, okay then, I won't mention it again. So it's about accepting and recognising somebody else's appreciation. And as I say, the simplest way is just say thank you. This is much more difficult, which is criticism, or some people call it constructive feedback. But it's really how we might respond to that when somebody is giving us some feedback on something that didn't go particularly well. This is much more difficult, and it's easy enough for me to stand up here and say this is how you should behave. Because in reality, if somebody gives us some negative feedback or criticism, we feel quite emotional. So our natural response is to defend ourselves and become defensive. So what I'm suggesting with all of those points is, just don't take it personally. Take it for information. Maybe they've got a point. And if they've got a point, then thank you for making the point, because I can move on and do something about it. Whereas if nobody ever says, I will never know. So the fact that somebody has actually told you something is actually worth having as feedback. That's how to view it. Now, if you disagree with the content, that's something different. But I'm talking about one's initial reaction and trying to accept something gracefully, which I appreciate is not easy to do. So really what we're saying is that this cycle of influence, as it's called, all starts off with the voices in our head. Self-talk. There are voices in our head that give us messages that will say, oh, I wonder if it'll be all right. I wonder if this will go well. I wonder if I'll understand. I wonder if it's going to be challenging. I wonder if it's going to be boring. All the voices that go on up here, the self-talk. And research has shown that self-talk, or the voices, tend to be, the majority of the messages are negative, tend to be negative. So we very rarely say to ourselves, it's going to be brilliant, I'm really looking forwards to this. We tend to sort of start filling ourselves with concerns and apprehension. But the point is that self-talk influences self-esteem, how I feel about myself or about the situation, and then self-action, so what I might do. So I described that a little earlier with the behaviour cycle as well, so the belief cycle. The third part of what I'm going to talk about, which is about our career and knowing what it is that we want and where we want to go and what we want to achieve. So this, and lots of people talk about goals, and lots of talk about, sort of having long-term, medium-term, and then short-term goals. So the short-term being built up to medium and so on. And one important thing to recognise about goals is if we have none, when there is a choice to be made, or when we get options, it's very difficult to know how to make a choice if I don't know where I want it to lead to. The second thing to bear in mind is that goals are not carved in stone anywhere. They're a little bit like perception. They're not in real existence as such. They're ideas, they're thoughts. They will lead us in a particular direction, but we can change that direction if we find it isn't working. And that's absolutely fine. But if we have no direction, then the idea about moving on and moving forwards is going to be a little bit wasted. Because, moving forwards to where? So have the idea about what it is that we're trying to achieve here. We have two activities that we use for this. This is the first one. I'm not going to ask you to do this. I'm just going to explain it. There are 8 characteristics here of, or at least what we might consider aspects of life. And the idea is to see how much balance we have in our lives, around those. Now, those are 8 that we use that are quite general, but you can change those because different people clearly have different ideas. So this one says career, money, spiritual life, relationships, contribution, leisure, health, and education. And the wheel of life looks like this. The idea is that you rate each of those on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 to 10 outwards, where 10 is fully satisfied with that particular aspect of my life at the moment. So fully satisfied. And anything lower than that is, I'd like to perhaps improve that, or maybe not. And then you end up with something looking like this, which is a spider's web, where the lines are sort of joined up. And what it does, it gives us a reflection of how we feel things are in balance or not at the moment, so we can address things. When we look at things like prioritizing and managing time and stuff like that, and work-life balance, it's very rare that at the end of a person's life that they think back about what they've done and say, I wish I'd spent more time at work. So sort of thinking about that balance during your life, don't ever think back to that. And the other tool that we would encourage you to use is a SWOT analysis. Those of you who work in marketing or those kinds of activities will have come across SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. But this is about ourselves, all right? This is about individuals and doing an analysis of ourselves. Strengths and weaknesses are from within. So it's our own strengths, skills, likes, talents, preferences, and so on. Weaknesses are the things that we could perhaps improve, so we could perhaps learn a new language or try out something new and different, so improve a skill, as it were, a weakness. Opportunities and threats tend to be outside of us, so that would be influences from other people or from other organizations. But an opportunity, let's say, would be something positive, and the opportunity would be, for instance, within the organization to grow into a new role, or an opportunity to move somewhere different, or to try something else somewhere else, but recognizing that that could happen. And threats are sometimes the impact of that on other people in our lives. So, how practical would it be for me to accept a job which based me in a different part of the country completely? I don't know. But, that's potentially a threat. Or for me to acquire certain skills that would be needed to accept a different job. So, for instance, if I needed to have a car and to be able to drive and I couldn't, well, it's a bit of a problem. So, it's sort of looking at some of those things that could influence us. But it's worth doing. It's just a bit of reflection about ourselves and to identify where we go next. Increasing motivation, I will just literally show you these. There's sort of 6 points about motivation and different aspects of it. So I've already told you about talking to your manager about the relationship that you have and to be able to clear about what they want and what you want. So getting some clarity in terms of what's expected of you. If you don't know how to do something, find somebody who does and copy them. Because if they can do it, so can you. So it's always worth thinking about gaining experience by copying or modeling somebody else. If we say no to something, I just want to clarify this, the saying no. This is saying no to unreasonable requests. Well, none of us likes to say no, because we all like to be helpful and we want to be willing and so on. And I'm saying you should never say the N-O word, but what we do is if something is unreasonable, we have to negotiate something to say, and I'm sure this is a classic, isn't it? I can't do it by them, but I can do it by this, or I'll do this instead, or we'll swap things around. But other ways of looking at it are things like, I don't want to let you down. If I do it in that time, I know I won't do it at my best, and I won't give you the best result. So it's looking at it and coming across in a slightly different way, rather than saying, I'm not doing it. Because nobody wants to be the obstructive one or the difficult one. But the idea is to say no to that request, but yes to a slightly different request, and turn it to your advantage. This is the opposite in saying yes to new challenges. So if it's new and it's exciting and you want to have a go, say yes. And the final comment is about treating your own development as you would if it was somebody belonging to a friend. So you might help your friend, you might help a colleague if they come and ask you questions and so on about what you think they should do and so on. But what you should do is to identify yourself as well. Never forget yourself in all of this. So This is something which we just need to bear in mind, which is what's happening on the outside, and the sort of threats and so on that we might perceive there to be. So it's going outside perhaps of our comfort zone, and what does that feel like? So as they say, fear, which stands for, anybody come across the acronym of fear? What fear actually stands for? It stands for false expectations, all right, appearing real. That's what it stands for. False expectations appearing real. So it's ideas that we have, and it's about sort of feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So, going outside our comfort zones. So here's a few ideas. Now, this is a mini training session, but in all training sessions, you will get an acronym. So here it is. So the acronym here is braver, being braver. So breaking through the comfort zone, remembering to plan, asking yourself, what's the worst that could happen, visualizing success, evaluating and learning from mistakes, and rehearsing in your head, thinking, what am I going to say, how am I going to say it, and actually rehearsing what we're going to do. So all of that sounds fine, and you're thinking, yeah, that's all very well, but... And often there are barriers or obstacles. There are things that will stop us from actually taking that leap, as it were, to move forward. People say they want to move on, they want to develop their career, but it's the first step that can be quite difficult. So what's worth doing here is writing down the list of obstacles. So it could be a person, it could be a lack of knowledge, it could be not knowing what's expected of me, it could be not having the time. And then we have the kind of obstacles which, when we consider them, are what I call the internal committee, which is what's going up here, which is, I don't know if I'm good enough, so there's fear again. What happens if it doesn't work out? Then I'll look silly. And those kinds of things that we might think about, that maybe we're not worth it after all. And that's such a shame. So think of the bear. It's not really there, it's just an idea. And the idea about the worst that could happen is useful. That's what I do a lot, actually, is think about what's the worst thing that could happen. And your imagination is so much more powerful than the reality. You would imagine something far worse than what could really happen. So just do it anyway. So it's overcoming those things. So I wish you good luck. I hope that any thoughts that you have about improving your skills, which, as I say, I'm sure are already excellent, but just, how to take it a step further, that you feel free to do. Does anybody have any questions? I'm here if you want to ask questions. If not, there's a little coupon on your seat if you can complete that. And you've also, I think, got a discount voucher when you sign up for the PA skills course. Actually, any course. Thank you very much. Thank you.